Lassus System, Orbit of Lassus Station, early 2670. Corporal Strider, J.C. 4th ODR Battalion, Raptor Company Delta Platoon, 4th Squad. Strider and the rest of Raptor Squad had found themselves in the central engineering chamber, as directed by the digital waypoint set on their helmet's heads-up display. The number of corpses had lessened, and they were free from those sites, at least for the moment, but were now presented with the engineering department of the station. If not for their built-in night vision, then their portion of the station would be pitch black. Some of the doors they came across had to be torched and breached with smaller controlled explosions with the use of a thermite door-breaching charge. By now, they had used their final charge on the door to the central power core room. "Strider, radio in, we're turning on the station," ordered his sergeant. "Copy," Strider replied, prepping his comms pack. "Command, this is Raptor 4. Do you copy? We found the power core, booting up now." As one of the lower enlisted began the sequence, Strider heard over his radio to essentially abort, but the station had already run its sequence, and the lights in the room illuminated their visors, almost blinding them. "Turn off your NVs," ordered the sergeant. With a press of a button, they manually turned off their enhanced night vision and were now met with fluorescent lighting, which felt almost dizzying to him and some of his compatriots. "Always hated this light, to think they use it too," commented a nearby corporal, their name Castor spelled out on his armor just above his mid-chest. "You said it, shit gets on my nerves," Strider replied. "Couldn't they have used something more natural?" Strider was referring to the lights aboard TRSC vessels that used light in between incandescent and fluorescent. However, light usage was much more diversified on ships in the modern day, and this went for many of the living areas aboard ships that used mostly warm light, while hallways and office spaces used cool light. "The TRSC still use the same light, man," the opposing corporal responded to Strider, "but I agree. It would be nice if we got better light." As the two conversed, the squad received an ominous message that felt like it came from within their heads.
"I am your phantom, your sword, my enemy. I to die shall be done."
"What the hell was that? It sounded like it was in my head," one of the raiders said. His transmission was filled with static, but was still clear compared to the message they had just received.
"Minerva, what was it?"
came over the radio from the Admiral.
"Unknown. It did come, undoubtedly, from the station. I urge the raiders to expedite their process to the intelligence archives before whatever it was we woke up swarms them."
"You heard her, boys! Get that intel, then we can blow that station into the planet," the Admiral said with haste, and his squad responded with a resounding, "Aye, sir." With the systems now running, they were given a new waypoint that led to a door opposite where they had entered. They tried to open it, but to no avail. "Castor, breach it," ordered their sergeant. The name Blythe was printed on his chest plaque as he ordered his squad. "Out of charges, gotta do it manually," he replied, bringing out a manual breach torch. "Do it!" Castor nodded and began to work with another working the other half of the door. The room was situated with only two entries, their original and another across from it. Situated in the center was the main core operating system in the heart of the station. There existed a series of pipes that extended from the core's computer, which they used for cover and supported aim. "Minerva, do we have an idea of the hostile contact?" Strider called to the AI.
"They are mechanical in nature, presumably the automated workforce that inhabited the station. I would assume them to be extremely hostile."
"Noted," he replied, reiterating the information to the squad. The squad's communications operator oversaw a direct line to higher command, but orders from an AI are usually disseminated to the squad simultaneously. But to ensure no confusion, a verbal reiteration was needed. This was mainly because personnel comms had a habit of not transmitting over a wider band. As they aimed toward their last entrance, they noted small red dots on the bottom of their HUD. The distance set was 25 meters for the radius, revealing how close the enemy was. From the entrance, it was a linear hallway that took a sharp left turn from their perspective, and as the dot rounded a corner, they saw it. It was a robot that looked similar in height to a Celian, but had lanky arms that dropped to his knee joint, with what looked to be a captain's hat placed atop it at a crooked angle. It had a painted expression on its once black exterior in the form of eyes and a smile colored with dried Celian blood. In its right hand, it held a pointed object that shined from the light above it and stood still. They noticed on their mini-map that the dots ceased their movement with the revelation of the autonomous bot. "I don't know what the fuck that thing is, but it ain't right," one of the raiders said, training his sight on the dome of the imitation. Agreement sounded from those around him when a sharp mechanical screech sounded from the creature. It pointed its weapon at the squad, and the dots that ceased now began to move, more rapidly, and rounded the corner with a quick pace unlike before. The robots that revealed themselves were similar to the one in the hat, and many had tools fashioned for combat that shared the same discoloration upon the one from before, dried green Celian blood. The squad then began firing into the crowd of advancing murder bots. They went down easy, but their HUD showed a steady stream flowing into the corridor. To conserve ammo, two of the raiders maintained suppressive fire into the corridor with a belt-fed squad automatic weapon, the KTAC M506 SAW. "Caster, how long until that door is open?" demanded the sergeant. "Almost got it," he said, and with a thud, the melted portions fell back on themselves. "It's open!" With their new access, raiders began filtering through to the next area, covering those in the rear with continuous fire as the robots consumed the hallway. Bodies of the hostiles filled most of the corridor, making it difficult for their traversal, subsequently making them stumble among their fallen comrades.
"Raptor,"
Minerva said.
"I have managed to gain access to doors, but access to larger systems is still beyond my command. I have found a likely possibility for the source of the murderous automatons."
"Where to?" responded Strider, as the group moved forward, taking down a straggler of the same robot they previously fired upon.
"I am detecting a large electrical signature, not native to the station, and separate from the core within the station's Central Archive Intelligence Department. You will most likely find your culprit there."
"Much obliged," he said, informing his sergeant. "Got us a waypoint, with the least resistance if possible." Another door opened and several shots rang out, this time against two larger robots in similar form to the smaller ones. "They're starting to get big, Minerva." A brief silence followed before the waypoint on their HUD was updated. The word "thanks" was sounded by Strider as they followed the new waypoint.
"Of course, Corporal,"
replied Minerva. Raptor Squad proceeded on their new route, encountering less than before. They were consistently being followed, so to prevent them from catching up, Castor was responsible for the sealing of the doors, which he did by disabling the access panel beside the doors to prevent electrical or manual operation. He and his partner quickly added a weld at key joints for the doors before leaving to meet with the rest of the group.
"Raptor Squad Delta,"
Minerva spoke out.
"You are close to the intelligence archives. I am detecting multiple signatures in the chamber. Exercise caution."
"Roger," said Blythe. "Let's go, Raptors! Double time!" Strider followed in the center of the group as they made their way to the archive room. From what he could recall, most of the enemy was behind them, being held back by the shoddily welded doors, but they soon began to hear loud banging that echoed throughout the halls. Noticing the implication, they followed their route with haste, taking down several small lone robots as seen before. Occasionally, they would encounter a larger cluster, but a well-placed grenade made short work of the enemy. As the point man rounded a corner, a shot rang out, landing its mark on his chest. A short yell was sounded, and the raider fell on his back, now motionless. "Damn it, they hit Ollie!" shouted the raider closest to him as he raised his left fist at a 90-degree angle, signifying the rest of the group to halt. "Ollie, you hear me?" Silence followed, raising the raider's temperament to a higher level. "Strider," called the sergeant. "Do we have air support yet? We'll need it when we get out of here." "Wait one," replied Strider, as shots from the raiders now began their exchange with an enemy just down the hall. "Command! Raptor, how are we on air support?"
"Troop transport is inbound and circling. Fighter support is available when you are clear with the intel."
"Copy!" He turned to the sergeant. "We got it, but we need the intel first before they can support us." He nodded, and gave orders to the idle raiders. "Split up, Fire Team Alpha. Stay here and prepare for a push. Fire Team Bravo, take the flank. There's a maintenance tunnel that runs on the sides that run along the side of the interior. That'll be your entry point. Go now!" Raptors 8 through 12 did as ordered, and went back the way they came before taking a left. Several shots rang out, but Strider noticed all 5 were still together on his mini-map before ultimately traveling beyond his sensors.
"Allow me to assist,"
Minerva added.
"I have managed to manipulate surface-level sensors. Your advance should be masked from the enemy for the moment, but it won't be long before they regain control of their systems."
Understood. Strider relayed the new information, and the raiders began their assault into the room. After exchanging shots, another raider was successful in bringing to cover Ollie and began field triage. He took a shot of a kinetic round that embedded itself midway through the up-armored chest plate. The round was moderately large, and the corpsman took out a medical device that could take a close-up X-ray scan of the patient, adding to his diagnostic. As he did so, he returned to Blythe with his analysis. "Took a large kinetic round to his upper chest. He has a pulse, but it's weak. Hit him hard enough to knock him out." He pulled the bullet out, and it was mushroomed with a thin central canal within the mushroomed pattern. He shook his head and began treating the downed patient. "An armor-piercing round steel core got lodged in his scapula. He has to get off this station." The sergeant, who stayed with Fire Team Alpha, furrowed his eyes in frustration. "Strider, get a medivac. We've got a casualty. High pre." He nodded in response and updated command on their request. It was met with affirmation, but he was issued to first complete their initial objective.
"You have your orders. Secure the intel first and you'll have your ride."
Strider tried to negotiate for a more expeditious evac, but he was met with the same response from the Admiral.
"Sergeant, intel comes first, then we get our evac."
"Damn it," he replied, anger infused with every pronunciation. "Bravo, you ready?" A call of affirmation came through the comms, and the assault was a go. "Move it, Alpha!" The point man swapped with a man behind him that wielded a squad automatic weapon and let pass a wall of lead that mangled and tore any within direct sight of the hallway. Similarly, from within the chamber, a controlled explosion erupted from the right wall that threw shrapnel into the nearby automatons. They deftly exited their abrupt entrance and sent well-placed shots into the barely working droids. Those that survived were scattered behind cover in the corners of the room and after the initial assault. They left their cover and tried to fire into their enemy, but were met with perfectly executed return fire that promptly ended them, ensuring Terran control. "Clear! All clear! Clear here!" Responses were sounded from the raiders as they swept the room from door to door. "Secure those hatches and prepare to extract the data! Strider, that's you!" The other raiders secured their entrances and began marking them with large amounts of X4 explosive, while Strider began diving into the Celian computer systems. By fastening similar cables to a modified cable adapter, he was successful in creating a link to properly communicate with their systems from his personal datapad. The cable used was a newly fashioned universal cable designed to integrate seamlessly into their systems shortly after integration from Chief Commander Yorla's fleet. Granted, it was done without their knowledge. With an update headed by Minerva herself, he was able to read, translate, and download all data from the Central Archive's computer. As he was nearing completion, he was notified of a presence behind him. It was his sergeant. "How's it coming along?" "Steady. We're gathering a lot, but at this rate, those bots will be on us in no time." The sergeant returned to his post and let Strider continue his work. In terms of tech literacy, Strider was competent in what he needed to do, and this task was no different. 68, 71, 73, he whispered to himself as he monitored the download status. Looking good. As the status percentage reached 92%, it stalled for an unusual amount of time. "What the hell?" he said to himself again, this time rechecking the hard connection he adapted, questioning whether he applied them correctly. When his minor investigation yielded no further results, the screen morphed into a series of unknown symbols and a display that resembled a frozen screen that had glitched itself into a dreaded blue error screen.
"Cease your attack. Invaders, help.
"Minerva," he called out. "We got an issue." He connected a second display to the first, and it worked as a backup troubleshooting display.
I am aware, Corporal. I have preloaded your datapad with a countermeasure.
"What kind of countermeasure?" he reiterated.
A digital combat malware for our guest. I do apologize for the previous device,
she said, as Strider looked to the first pad in question. It was visually smoking from overheating components. By rerouting the remaining data to the second pad, he was able to finish the download and recovered the data from the first by extracting a removable drive. He plugged in the external drive and found that with the previous 92% and the remaining 8% downloaded onto the second, their mission was a success. "Thanks. Get us the quickest route out of here. We have wounded," he said, packing his device into a secure pouch. As he got up, pounding was heard from their initial entrance and shots were now heard from their improvised entrance. "Bogies in the maintenance tunnels! Frag 'em!" ordered one raider that led the Bravo fire team that let loose a grenade followed by a couple more. The shock wave of the explosion was felt at the center console as Strider readied his rifle. He checked his magazines and saw he was still sufficient with ammo, unlike some of his brothers. As the fighting intensified, the doors were cracked open, letting through only a couple of bots at a time. His squad fired into the enemy that broke through, as well as firing into the newly made crevice by the automated enemy. "I thought we took what was controlling them," stated one raider as he threw a grenade into the cracked entrance, hitting a peeking bot before blowing it and others around it into nothing. "Shouldn't they be shut down?" Strider felt the same way. Their data collection was anticlimactic, and the supposed tussle with the enemy program lasted for less than only a minute. Before he could wonder any more about the subject, an update was issued on their HUD, leading to the poorly manned door they left to only one other raider.
The route you need for extraction is through those doors. Continued straight until told otherwise.
Strider acknowledged, as did his sergeant, and he began routing troops to their extract. The indicators on their mini-maps proved that they had sparse enemy combatants, at least those that moved, and they opened the door. They fired their shots into the clueless bots that barely had time to direct their attention to their invaders before being dispatched. As Minerva said, they continued straight until a new waypoint was displayed to change their route. Now, with their casualty base growing little by little, their overall speed had slowed. Some limped as they received rounds to their legs in the soft armor of their undersuit from enemy AP rounds. "This ain't looking good, Minerva," Strider stated as he glided as the pace of the wounded. "How much further?"
Not much longer, Corporal. I will advise, however, to seal any suit punctures with a temporary vacuum seal component.
"Noted," he replied curtly as they entered a final door. Past the door they were met with the blackness of the void, but now the sun illuminated the space, revealing the same gruesome scenes of violently expired Cellians. A waypoint led to their next entrance, which led to the thin array of the port docking tubes reserved for the larger ships. From where they stood, a ship was seen docked at the end of their tube. It was a sleek-looking ship that had a wide cross-section, but its profile was slim. It was a large-sized ship that could be manned by a singular pilot or manned by a crew of 6. The ship itself was a Galaxy-class cutter that was outfitted with a series of medical bays that each offered spots for varying degrees of injuries sustained. It had its own series of weapons for self-defense, but served well within areas of operation where they had air superiority. Strider then turned to the group and told them of their vacuum seal component, and to check all for punctures in their suits. It was a spray that was applied to the external portions of their undersuit, and created a temporary seal from space, and served as a crucial tool in any spacefarer's box. As they entered the docking tube, a call from a raider in the rear notified the group of a mass of bots emerging from the sides of the station along the main roads. "Move!" ordered their sergeant. Already fatigued and gasping for air, the raiders complied and pushed themselves beyond, especially now with their extraction so close. The raiders covered the rear as they descended further into the tube, and the bodies of automated bots that littered the entrance began to clog it. Those that made their way closer to their exit provided cover for those in the rear, as some of the enemy would make it past the debris and charge their position. Very few carried firearms, and now there were mostly droids with shoddily made melee weapons that attempted to charge, each meeting the same fate. They secured the entrance and the wounded were filed in, followed by the main body, then the rear guard. Strider and Castor were now the last in the squad to secure the rear when they were met with a singular bot that stood not far from their position. "What the hell?" Castor sounded out. It was the same bot that wore a bloodied captain's hat, with a face painted on its exterior from the blood of Sellians. It was unarmed, which caught both raiders off guard. As Castor and Strider raised their weapons to shoot, it raised its hands in a motion of surrender as it moved slowly towards them. "Get the fuck back!" commanded Castor to no avail. He fired a shot into its waist strut, causing it to collapse on its backside. Strider was about to deliver the final blow when it pulled an item from behind its head. It was cylindrical with a silver tube that matched the size of its small metal hands with a red button at the top. Sudden realization hit, and both Strider and Castor fired into the bot. But in the split second of their pull of the trigger, a flash of light erupted from the robot, engulfing the tube in a concussive blast that tore it from its structure, hurtling Castor and Strider around in the tube and eventually into space. Strider soon regained consciousness but woke to the cries of his squadmate, Castor, and to the gunfire of the slowly retreating cutter ship. Large objects flew around it that fired down on the ship. The fighter escorts were now firing at the new enemy, and soon their silhouettes vanished beyond the void. Get the fuck back!" Strider struggled to orient himself, as his suit was not equipped for EVA, but eventually traced a line of silver and gray that reflected the sun to the cry in question. He noticed sparks of light near the tip of an ever-extending spire towards the waypoint of his comrade. Again, cries of desperation filled his comms as he activated his helmet zoom-in function toward Castor. From his distance, he was able to make out his figure as well as those extending towards him. "Get off me, you bastards!" Several flashes of light followed, and the destruction of a nearby robot shattered away into the void in all directions. The Spire consisted of the murderous bots attaching to one another towards their prey like a fungus. He called for emergency pickup and tried to get Castor's attention when he felt a pressure on his ankle. When he looked down, he was met with a similarly painted face as the droid that blew up their tunnel, with a dried green wastefully painted on its facial exterior. Fear grabbed him, and Strider by instinct reached for his handgun and fired several shots into the face of the bot. He looked at Castor, and they had grasped him in their metal claws and began tearing away at his armor as he screamed, "Get the fuck off me!" He thrashed at the enemy. His weapons drifted from their sling with spent magazines that orbited with him as he used every bit of his tool set to waste on the enemy. He fired into them with his pistol, and after it was empty, he readily switched to a knife that was situated on his lower back. The debris of the robot menace grew, but so did their advance. Strider turned to his own group now and fired well-placed shots into the oncoming horde. Their advance was quick and unexpected and gave both little room to breathe. No more than several minutes had passed and help still had not come. He grew anxious, and this was helped by his increasingly fatigued comrade. Soon, his savage thrashing had come to an end, and the horde he had kept away quickly overtook him when a call came through to Strider. "I can't do this, Jace." "I'm sure help is on its way. Just hang on." Strider fired into several more droids before reloading and turned his attention back to Castor, who was now swarmed with automated menace. "I ain't going out by the hands of some bots. Wait." Before Strider could start his sentence, a flash of light took the place of Castor and all mater of materials scattered into the void, striking Strider and his own bots just moments after the explosion. A piece found its way onto his helmet that jolted him with a headache. He quickly applied the last of his vacuum seal to the areas likely hit before throwing the empty canister at the encroaching enemy. He fired some more rounds into the growing crowd, as well as some unused grenades, saving one for himself. "Come on, you bastards, what? You afraid to die?" Strider pulled his knife and kept the grenade in his offhand. He motioned for them to approach with an antagonizing gesture. "Let's tango, you soulless abominations." They advanced to his provocation and he fought. Instead of letting them have the pleasure of holding him, he decided to wrangle them first, using their mechanical bodies for leverage as he swiped, stabbed, punctured, and yanked as loose cables, all to take as many he can, hoping for help to arrive. Seconds that felt like minutes had passed, and Strider grew fatigued. His breathing was haggard and it felt heavy. He thought to himself the amount of time he spent in vacuum these last several moments, and deemed that he must be reaching his max operating time. He was granted 30 minutes, but with his fight for survival, he greatly reduced it to several minutes. It was only a matter of time. His eyes grew heavy, and his vision began to blur. So this is how I die? Real damn shame, he thought to himself. As his eyes closed, he let it take him and released himself to an eternal slumber, letting go of a primed grenade that drifted towards the horde of automated killing machines, hell-bent to end him. He had already stored the intel away in his reinforced pack that he wore, knowing well that the grenade would buy his reinforcements some time. With an explosion that riddled him with holes, along with a concussive force that ruptured his insides, his body propelled away from the advancing enemy, left to drift in the void.
Enemy short-range jammer neutralized. Beacon isolated. Primary field objective issued. Critical priority, retrieve data drives, Corporal Strider. Issuing secondary field objective. Neutralize enemy drones. Enemy matrix analysis. 77.7758%. Matrix analysis requires captured data. Friendly HUDs updated. Secondary objective complete. Primary objective in progress.